In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee.
Good afternoon and welcome to In Session. I'm your host, Dr. Farid Holakouee, and I'll be with you for the next 2 hours here on Radio Hamra. Studio number to call in, 310-441-0555. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, so you can call in with any questions related to clinical psychology, including any emotional or psychological issues, parenting issues, and relationship issues as well. You can also follow me on Twitter or Instagram or like my page on Facebook to get updates on the show or suggest topics or books for the program. And the shows are uploaded at the end of each week to my SoundCloud page and podcast on iTunes. Again, our studio number 310-441-0555. Before I get to a caller, the book of the week for this week is Possessed, Why We Want More Than We Need by Bruce Hood. Possessed. And it's a new book. I just started it really today, actually, but I'll be sharing it with you on Monday. But looking at why we are so obsessed with ownership and having things and how this affects us negatively and how it ties into different aspects of our lives and our culture. Seems pretty interesting, and looking forward to sharing that with you on Monday's show. For now, let's go to a caller. Radio Hamra, you're on the air.
Yeah, hello, doctor.
Hi, thanks for calling.
Yeah, you're welcome. I want to first. I want to thank you for your amazing show.
Thank you.
It has been a long time I'm listening to your show, and I really like the emphasis you have on emotion, because I'm a person that I had a traumatic life, and I think I have lost my connection with my feelings and with my body, and I have learned a lot from you and from your show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your kind words. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm more aware of my feelings and feelings of others that before it was a lot of problem for me about that.
Well, I'm happy to hear that.
Also,
and
I'm calling from Europe.
Okay, great.
And I have friends from India that also also listen to your show. So I just wanted to say that because, your show is great.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate your kind words and your support. And hopefully we could talk a bit about what's going on for you and see what we can do for you.
Yeah, I go directly to my question.
Okay.
And my question is that I have this feeling that there is a conflict in me about my job that every once in a while comes up, and I feel like it doesn't let me do my actual job right now. It doesn't let me to be faster and wholeheartedly in my own job, because my job is I'm a comic artist. So, but in a European style, it's a bit different from American style. And before that, I have been in video games, I have been in animations, and I have been doing visual works for movies and these kind of things. So it has been like 4 years. I have moved from Iran, and I live in Europe now. And I have been invited here to do this job because they were thinking that I am good at this job. The reason I'm saying that is that I want to make it clear that I am good at what I do. I mean, like, other people consider me successful or one of the best in our kind of work.
That's a good clarification. One thing as you're talking, I'm thinking of the book I talked about on Monday's show. It's called Mind in Motion by Barbara Tversky. And she had a whole section on comics and comic animation and things of that sort that maybe you'll find interesting. So I thought the whole book was very interesting, but you might find that specific aspect or area of it. It was the book that I talked about Monday night. But anyway, okay, so you do kind of comic artist, visual animation, those types of things. You are good at what you do, but it seems like you're having some doubts about either, I don't know if it's your job or your career, but maybe we can get into what you're going through now.
Yeah. So the difficulties I have with this job, before I was just working in animation and those kind of things, and I felt like this is not what I really like to do in my life.
Mm-hmm.
For example, when I was working in video games, I was getting a lot of money, but I didn't want to be in violent kind of. I mean, like video games are usually violent. You have to draw people with guns, with swords, with these kind of things, and I was not interested in that. So I said, okay, I will go to comics and I will do something that I like. I will make my own stories. But the problem recently is that I have changed, and I'm not the same person as I was before. And for example, before it was okay for me to be lonely and to be alone in a room and do the job all alone. But recently, because I think I have matured, I think I have changed, and the things that was before comfortable for me is no longer comfortable. And maybe I should tell you a bit of a history of myself.
Yeah, let's get into. Before you get into, how old are you?
I am now 32 years old.
32, okay. And did you go with any family to when you moved to Europe from Iran, or are you by yourself there?
No, I am by myself here.
Okay.
I am from a family that we were more than 10 children.
Wow. Okay.
And from the same parents. Yeah, we were like 14 children.
Wow.
I just didn't want to say, but and I am the number 9.
Okay.
So, as a child, I was actually a neurotic child. That I had a very traumatic, very scary childhood before age 6, and after when I grew up, it was very bad. We were dealing with all sorts of trauma from sexual abuse, from poverty, from every kind of adverse childhood experience, all kind of adverse childhood experience. I have experienced all of them. So, and I left as I grew up, but I was always very good at school. I was very, always the best in a school.
Okay.
Because I was a bit intelligent, and also because I had a very, very low self-esteem. I wanted to be someone. I wanted to be something to compensate for that feeling real bad about myself. And then when I was around 15, 16, I became very oppositional because my father was really cruel, really violent, really punishing, not in a physical way, but verbally. I mean, he was a narcissist, and he was like pushing us too much. And my mom was really cold because, I mean, even if she was not cold, we were a lot of children, so she couldn't do anything for us. And they were farmers. They have to do a lot of things, so they didn't have time at all for us, and we were completely neglected. And when I got to 18, I became very bipolar, not bipolar type 1, but a bit mild bipolar, maybe hypomanic a little bit.
Okay. Did you get diagnosed?
I was diagnosed later at the age 24, something like that. Because, for example, I remember it became a conflict. It became clear because, for example, I was in the street and I felt like a bomb of energy explode in me, and I ran until I felt like now I can stop. You know that explosion of energy that is in bipolar. So I had this bipolar with me, and as I grew up, I was my narcissistic side show up more and more until the age of 26, 27. I became avoidant personality. I became more and more isolated in life. I cut the connection with people. I was scared of people. I was not comfortable with people because of my childhood, and I felt like on my own I'm much better. And actually, so when I was like 27, I realized about Dr. Holakouee, your father, and I start getting interested in psychology from that age. So it has been like 10 years. I have been studying on psychology. I have been working on a lot of things like cognitive behavior therapy, like post-traumatic stress disorder, I know all the personality disorders,
Okay.
about anxiety, about shame, about guilt, about neurotic personality. I know all the psychologists that work on this. My favorite is Karen Horney, Alfred Adler, and these kind of people.
Mm-hmm. But now let's come forward to what's going on now. So, because you're not sure about your job, because what we have to look at is what you're experiencing. It could be that you're in the wrong job, wrong career, or it could be just the frustrations of any job that you're experiencing that can come up, or it could be things happening in your personal life or personal psychology and how you're doing that's affecting how you feel at work in general. So tell me a bit about what you're experiencing at work that makes you question if you want to continue with your job.
Yeah. The reason that I'm paying attention to these psychology things is that the other side of the conflict is I like psychology. I want to go into study psychology. I feel like I want to go there. And once in 1 minute I will come back to your question, but I just explained this. For example, once I called Dr. Holakouee 2 years ago, and he told me that you are emotionally probably dead, something like that. I think he suspected narcissism in me. Mm-hmm. So I studied post-traumatic stress disorder literature, books and stuff like that. I started doing some reactions. And after that, I felt like my feelings are coming back to me. I no longer could stay in my room and work alone. I liked people. I wanted to be with people. Mm-hmm. And in these recent years, I felt like, because in Iran, I was always in hyper-arousal mood. And after I came to France, in a small city in France, my stress response system, I think if they call it, it calmed down, and I had the opportunity to grow up and to learn and to mature. So This is how I changed. I wanted to just say that how I changed. Uh-huh. So the problem I have now, the difficulty is that my job is a lonely job. I have to do it always in a room, and from morning to evening, it's always me. I am not in touch with people. I am not talking to anybody that much. And we have a community in our job that they are all lonely people. And I can say that we are all a bit neurotic people, that we are mostly narcissistic, avoidant people, kind of people. I should not put this label on people, but this is my feeling. Yeah. And probably, and most likely, I'm wrong. So what I'm going to say is that we are difficult people in communication, in interpersonal relationships. And the job it's very hard work. I have to work like 10 hours or 12 hours, but it's very low payment. I may get like €1,000 or per month. That is very low. Mm-hmm. And it's not the job that is good for anybody. You know, I'm not giving anything to anybody. It's because my motivation to come to art, it was like I was a child that was neglected, that was being no one, so I wanted to become an artist. I wanted to become famous and become someone, then I can get love. Mm-hmm. And it was my life was all about getting. But recently, my goal is happiness, and I think that happiness comes more from giving than from getting.
Absolutely. Let me stop you there for a second. So it's not clear yet, but something you think might have been happening is that before, because of what you experienced in childhood, I mean, you described lots of things about your personality and different things, but maybe you were afraid or more comfortable not being around people, so you chose a career and a job where you could be alone, and that was your comfort zone. But now you feel like you don't feel good there because you actually want to interact with people more, and so you're not happy in your job. Now, the other part we have to look at is there does seem to be something about trying to seek recognition or seek some kind of validation, which we all want, but it seems like because it was missing for you from childhood, that you were seeking that, and as you even just said yourself, you wanted to become a famous artist and then get love, attention, fame in that way to fill that hole within you. And so we also have to keep that in mind, that you're not just trying to look for a way of filling that up, and you're not happy in this one, and then you'll go somewhere else. And what you might experience is whatever other career you pick, you'll get to the same place again. And that's something we want to be mindful of. So you gave me a lot of background, which will give us a foundation to go forward. And what I'm going to do is, we're getting to a commercial break. So I'm going to put you on hold. And after the break, we'll talk a bit more about what's going on in more detail. And then I'll try to connect it with you to see if we can figure out what's happening. Is it really about this being the wrong career for you, or is this just pointing out an unhappiness that you're feeling within? Okay?
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we'll be right back. All right, you're listening to In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Before the break, we were with the caller. Let's go back to him now. Radio Hamra, you're on the air again. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can
Yes.
hear you.
Okay. So you told me a lot about the background, family life, and childhood. Very difficult. 14 kids. You mentioned lots of trauma and abuse throughout life, and your own ups and downs that you went through. You mentioned the bipolar itself, which is ups and downs, but it seems like you feel like you've gone through a lot of changes in your own personality and things. But here you are in your job, and you are not happy with it. And it seems almost every way, from what you're telling me. Financially, it's not very good. How you feel about the work itself, how meaningful it is to you, and then also not being able to work with others much and communicate. Seems like something feels like it's missing. And it could be just that something is missing overall, that you want more connection in your life. Work could be one way to do that, but it might not necessarily be through your work. But you mentioned something about psychology. So you one of the things you're thinking of is going and becoming a therapist yourself?
No, I don't want to be
Okay.
exactly a therapist, because I was studying for a long time. I study every day, psychology books, and I at least 3 hours per day, and I was always feeling resistance in myself to go and study psychology. And I finally realized that I am not interested in the negative side of psychology. For example, in that going to meet with patients.
Mm-hmm.
And to try to fix patients or try to help patients. That I'm more interested in the positive side of psychology. I'm not interested in people who, I don't want to bring back people who have lost the balance. I'm interested more into keeping the balance of people who are in balance,
Mm-hmm.
and actually improve their performance, improve their actualize their potential. And actually, I'm more into, for example, my main interest is post-traumatic stress disorder, and I think about it, about my fantasy is that be educated in psychology and go back to Iran and in those parts of the country that I'm coming from, and there is a lot of child abuse, there is a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder, there is a lot of problems. I just try to do, for example, something like what you are doing, or something like your father is doing, or something like Bessel van der Kolk is doing, just enlighten and enrich and educate people about these kind of things, or help them to understand themselves better,
Mm-hmm.
or help them to connect with their bodies or with their feelings, or to be more aware of these kind of things,
Yeah.
to be more understanding
Okay.
of this kind of.
Well, I think, and there is a movement of positive psychology in the last few decades, which I think has been very important, that just like in physical health, we don't just focus on illnesses, we focus on how you promote health and maintain health and what you can do. But in hearing you talk, it makes me wonder how much you've gotten in touch with your own pain, because there almost seems to be a way you don't want to go there. Now, post-traumatic stress disorder, of course, that is facing the pain and the trauma, but I'm wondering how much you're okay with your own story and what you've been through. And that's something I felt in how you were talking, is that you mentioned to start the show that you have gotten more in touch with your feelings, which is good, but I still do feel a disconnect. You mentioned, my father mentioned that too, but there does seem to be a disconnect with your feelings. And so even in hearing you talk about what you'd like to do, it almost seems like you don't want to see the negative in others or the negative things they're going through, because it's going to bring up your own pain. And that's something that I'd want you to think about. How does that sound to you when I say that?
Well, I think it's true. I'm not completely in touch with my feelings, and I am working on it, and I am every day working on it. And just recently, I'm studying the books of Alexander Lown, a psychologist, and I'm studying on internal family system just to try to connect with myself. And the reason that my main interest in psychology is just because I understand myself better.
Mm-hmm.
Just because this is the language that I understand, that I feel like understood, and I feel like I can understand words better than any other thing. Not physics, not chemistry, not art. Here I can understand myself, and I know that my work with myself is not complete. I had like, because of traumatic kind of things, I have very intrusive thoughts. I have very a problem with the sleeping and these kind of things. But after studying, after doing many reactions that I did by myself based on the books, and I have a lot of improvement, and those intrusive images never came back. It has been like 2 years.
Okay, good.
So I am okay with getting in touch with my pain, but it's not complete. The reason I don't want to be in touch with that illness is that actually, I don't know, maybe you are right. People have too much pain. It's very difficult for me to deal with that too much pain. It's very heavy. And also in my family, I have many personality disorders. So when I'm around personality disorders, I'm not very comfortable. It makes me anxious, and it brings the child inside me out. And I am more into prevention and not letting people go into personality disorder, because I think it's much easier than improving somebody that already has personality disorder. And
which I agree with you, of course. And always there's a quote, I think it's Frederick Douglass. It's something, it's like, it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. And of course, it applies to men or women. And I completely agree with that. And that the more we can invest in early parenting, early child care, all that stuff is very important, and helping people to prevent these things from becoming problems. At the same time, the reality is that we still have all those issues to deal with. And I can hear you, and you do have a lot of self-awareness, which is good, that you recognize that, okay, when I talk to certain people, or if I'm around certain types of issues, the child in me comes back. And that's what happens for a lot of people who have experienced pain and trauma, and that's still not resolved. And the amount of pain you're talking about, we wouldn't expect that you're going to be done dealing with it, that it'd be finished. But it brings them back to that old childhood state. And maybe that's also how you feel, that is, I can't help someone if when I'm around that, it makes me feel like a child, because also with that usually means a feeling of powerlessness, that you can't do much, you can't help. And so you feel more empowered when you're focused on the positive, which I think is great. I just still hope you see that the healing you have to do within yourself has to also mean going into the darkness a little bit more. Whether and by yourself, I'll be honest, it's very helpful, but I think with a therapist, it's going to be a lot more meaningful and almost necessary, considering how much you're talking about you've dealt with. Because on your own, you can study and understand, and you've gone through some exercises, it sounds like, which is great. But I would still highly recommend that. And actually, I was going to talk about going to therapy in general today, and I might still do that depending on how the show is going. But I would highly recommend you think about, the studying is great, but sometimes the studying keeps us in the realm of intellectual, rational mind, and not facing the emotional side. And it's interesting because you said something you've gained from listening to me is the emphasis on that. And so I think that resonates with you, but it's still hard for you to get in there. And it's not something that if you do it for a week or a couple months, you're going to heal all this pain. But I think it's something that I'd want you to face rather than avoid, because it's going to continue to dictate things that happen in your life.
I completely agree with you. And one of the reasons I didn't study, even when I was talking to Dr. Holakouee, he told me that you should go study psychology without even I mentioned psychology or I mentioned my interest. He told me that, but I said that I cannot go there because I don't want to. I feel like it's exactly the same thing. I think I became somebody that uses this tool to deal with others, but not to deal with himself.
Yeah.
So I wanted to stay free of that education and keep myself away from that and from being officially somebody in that realm, so I can work on myself and I can discover myself. And but I guess, yes, you are completely right, and I feel all this pain and all this sometimes loneliness and this kind of disconnection from people, and being a bit marginalized sometimes. Not now it's much less, and I'm improving very, very quickly. But I feel all those things you are saying. But before we go to commercial, you told me that sometimes when we want recognition, we choose another job, but actually we fell in the same trap.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that creates a lot of doubt in me. I tell myself maybe I am that narcissistic guy, that I feel like a failure in my own job. So I want to go there and be somebody there, or there I can be, maybe this tendency to be somebody that is in touch with the big public, maybe it's the same reason I want to be seen, I want to be recognized. But at the same time, I feel like I knew this from a long time ago, and consciously I kept myself away from population and from people, because I knew that I am somebody that wants to be seen, and I always try to hold the control on that and hold the control on the child inside me, that I don't want to fall in the trap of the child inside me again.
We don't want to fall in the trap of that child, but we do want to understand. I want to acknowledge your awareness, or you keep reflecting on yourself, which is very good. We have to try to understand ourselves better, which is always a process, and always going to be more helpful with another person because they can see us more objectively than we can ever see ourselves. But that child that wants recognition, I know you're saying you don't want to fall into that trap, but we can understand where that little boy is coming from. Being in a family of 14 kids, and on top of that with all the trauma and drama and things that you were going through, we can understand that he does have this strong desire for recognition and to be seen. Now, that doesn't mean being famous has to be the way to give him that, but we can understand where that's coming from, and he might need that to be fulfilled in a way that will feel good. By first yourself recognizing your own goodness, not in a prideful way or arrogance, but genuinely loving yourself and recognizing the good in you. And I think that's something that maybe with the way you described yourself, what you might be going through is what a lot of people go through in general, but especially if they've had such a painful childhood, the way you've described it, is they go back and forth from thinking they're better than other people to thinking they're worse than other people. So either I'm like amazing and so good and everyone should look up to me, or I'm a loser and bad and all those things. And I could imagine you going back and forth between those, unfortunately, which neither one of them is true. You're not better than other people. You're not worse than other people. You are you, and you're worth as much as everyone else. But I think you're still conflicted in figuring out that part of yourself. And so when you want to be recognized and seen, I can completely get that. And something in what you described so far, you talked about your family, you talked about work, but I'm wondering when it comes to relationships in your life, and not just romantic, but even friendships, do you have meaningful friendships, meaningful relationships in your life?
Well, I had two questions to ask you before I called, and I was in this conflict that which one I should ask first. But I should ask about relationships, or in particular romantic things, or I should ask you about the work.
Yeah.
So the work is a bit more painful. So I was thinking, go with the work, and if I had time, I will go there too.
Well, it's interesting. The work is more painful, but I also think the work serves as your way of not focusing as much on the relationships. Because I get the feeling from you of someone who likes to stay in his own mind. And being one of 14 kids, dealing with everything you've dealt with and trauma and abuse and all those things, it's understandable that your mind was a safer place than the real world. And so even you're recognizing you maybe chose a career that isolated you more. And now you're coming to realize that you might not want that, which could be good and moving you away from that. But I get the sense that even in the way you talk about studying and doing things, it's very much an internal, personal, and isolated type of a thing, not something that actually creates more connection for you.
That's actually very, very true, and I can say that even I suspect myself that if I go to any job, I will find something that it's actually not producing money, and or maybe I go into research or something that is very, very much like that. But I'm trying to not do that. I'm working on my relationships, and I feel like I am now ready. Before I couldn't cope with people. Now I have studied, and I have after several years of working, and I improved my self-esteem by reading a lot of all the Brandon books for several times, and not only the rational self-esteem that comes from neocortex, but I try to go to limbic system and emotional, because that rational self-esteem is very weak. It relapses all the time. So if I go to brainstem and I go to a limbic system and make it connect to myself, that will be more resistant. And I am actually more resistant now, and I am very comfortable with people now. I talk to them a lot. But the problem here is that I have a job that I have to work like 12 hours to make a few money. So most of my time is on the work. And in the evening and in the weekend and all the time, I am always in touch with people and with different people. But here, in Iran, I had a lot of friends, but here, and in relationship, yes. For example, I had a girlfriend for like 6 years when I was in Iran. It was a good relationship, but I found my mother, and she found his father, his narcissistic father, and I found my dependent mother and cold mother. So I end that relationship. After that relationship, I had several not very good relationships. And one thing I wanted to ask is that always borderline people are very interested in me. Borderline girls are immediately in touch with me, and I have a rule for myself that I say no girl will come to me unless she's borderline.
Well, it might not be that black and white, but the thing you might also want to look at is you're being attracted to those types of girls too. So it's usually a two-way street with these things, and it can make sense based on how traumatic your childhood was that you're going to be drawn to people who are. It reminds you of home, that instability, the chaos that comes with being in a relationship with someone who's borderline. And unfortunately, also someone who's borderline, in the beginning, they're going to make you feel like you're the king of the world, like the greatest thing that ever happened to them, because that's what they do with going between idealization and devaluing. So in the beginning, when it's the idealization phase, you're going to feel really good because they're going to give you that feeling of recognition and validation that you're amazing, you're the best thing that ever happened to them, they've never met someone like you, and all those things. So as much as you're saying they're attracted to you, which is probably true, there does seem to be something about you that's going to be attracted to them as well. And you have to look at that side too. And so rather than saying a rule of, if a woman is attracted to me, they must be borderline, I'd want you to also think of, well, if a woman is showing interest in me and I'm attracted to them, I want to really try to ask myself, can I see any of those signs in them? And so you might be drawn to someone who is going to give you an unrealistic type of attention early on, which isn't very real and is going to fade and turn into something bad because you're seeking so much to get that feeling of validation, of being amazing, of being so good, that you're going to look for someone giving you that, but unfortunately usually comes in a way that's not very genuine and has a flip side where you're going to get very hurt and the relationship is going to go very poorly.
Yeah, some years ago I was like that, but like 5 years ago, after I realized that these are borderline and they bother me a lot, now I see that they are attracted to me. They immediately come to me, but I try to keep myself away from them. And I usually don't date them. They are actually very good girl, very intelligent girl, very beautiful girl. But I know that this is difficult, and that it's very painful for me when people are not actually emotionally in touch. I know that they are not emotionally in touch with themselves. I know that they don't have a sense of self, and I know that this. I don't want this. I want this. Yeah. I want somebody that has emotion and I really likes me, or I like that person, or has a sense of self, or has a stability, or is deep. I don't want shallow relationships.
Yeah.
And actually, being an immigrant here in France, and actually, I mean, like, there is a bit bias of maybe I'm not sure, but maybe a bit racism. I'm not sure about that, but I mean, like socially, we are not, for example, I am not as valuable as for them, not for myself.
Yeah.
Maybe a Japanese or a German could be much acceptable for them than somebody that comes from Middle East and is a Muslim or this kind of things. This could be one of the reasons. And another reason that I am very much interested in people that are more healthy, more simple, more normal, and more stable, and also. But the problem is that, and I asked them out, but it haven't happened yet, and I was always asking myself why it's not happening.
Yeah.
I suspect that maybe emotionally I am not very available.
Well, that's what I'm wondering, because in talking to you, intellectually you can talk about emotions very well and very advanced, but it sounds again to me like it's more about the rational side than the emotional side. I do have other people I want to get to, but I don't want to wrap up with you, and we're at a commercial break. So let's talk a few more minutes after the break. At least, maybe I'll keep you on longer, but I do want to at least wrap things up. So stay on hold and we'll talk some more, okay?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. All right, you're listening to Radio Hamra. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's go back to the caller again. Caller, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry, I talk a lot.
No, I'm keeping you on. You don't have to. I want to keep talking to you. But we're talking about what you've been going through, and something I mentioned now that we've not that we fully resolved the work issue, but transitioning into the relationships. What I also want you to keep in mind is what you told me about even what you would like to do as work. For example, focusing on positive psychology on the positive side of things. It makes me wonder if you're in a relationship, how much tolerance you're going to have for the pains, problems, and issues of your partner. Now, of course, you're talking about women who had borderline personality disorder that you dated. I'm not talking about tolerating that if they're treating you in a bad way or something that's wrong, but even just having the capacity to emotionally be there for someone else when it might be hard for you to go into those negative, quote-unquote, negative spaces is something I also want you to be aware of when it comes to relationships.
That's an amazing point. For example, I have 4 type of people in me. First one, there is a child that is always going for people and tell them that please love me, and it's search for mom and that he didn't have. The second one is actually my father that goes around and try to find people that are wounded, depressed, and fail, and try to fix them and says that I fixed you and then you will love me. The other one is my teenager that says that I don't want to know you, I don't want to like you, I don't want you to like me, I just want to have sex and go away. So that's another one. And the recent one that actually is the mature one that actually those people are all involved with themselves. But this one actually, for the first time, I start seeing others. I start seeing other people. I start being present. And I start asking them how they are, not being always occupied with myself. I guess I have problem with what you are saying. I'm not very available for others. But I'm trying to be available more, and I am getting better at it.
Yeah.
And,
well, the thing is, and that again, you show a lot of awareness and reflection. It's good, but it's also about first being there for yourself. You're talking about being there for other people and asking them about the negative. And I know you think a lot about the negative, but I still feel this block within yourself in getting in touch with that pain, and that you feel like if you read about your pain, that's going to heal it, when really it's like if you were reading about a surgery. At the end, you have to actually go do the surgery itself. And I think that's somewhere where you're still going to be a little bit blocked. And the amount of pain you probably have within you, we can understand why you've decided unconsciously, if it may be, to not go there. But hopefully you'll take some risks in that direction. That's why I really suggest going to therapy, where it'll be, 1, safer because you'll have someone there. 2, they will be more aware of what's going on to give you even more insights than you're going to be able to think of yourself. And then 3, heal some of those wounds even more, which you can do better with someone else than you can do on your own. So have you gone to therapy before?
Not actually. I went a few times in Iran, but just for a few minutes. It was not therapy. Just explain, and they give me some medication.
Yeah.
But even if I had money, I would have no problem to go there and spend and be there. And I mean, like, to get healed. My problem is financial.
Okay.
So that's what that's the only thing that I have no resistance in to go there and heal myself. It's only I don't have money. But this is true that what you are saying. My pain, I know that my pain is too much strong, and I feel like it's. I feel like I have dealt with some of it enough to be on my legs, but the rest of it is so huge. For example, once I was doing a reaction, and I was so much in rage and I so much in pain that I was surprised that, oh my God, where this come from? How all this rage and anger come from? I cried a lot. I mean, like for several weeks, I was just crying. Before that I couldn't cry, and I was bringing out physically. I was liberating myself by punching and all those kind of stuff, and recognizing the feelings that I had about myself when the trauma was happening, and trying to be in touch with that child. And I'm now I appreciate. Before I was ashamed of that child and that adolescent, but now I appreciate them, and and they resisted so much pain.
Yeah.
If I go through one tenth of that pain, I would not last. But those people last. And
it's interesting the way you even talk about it. I understand what you're saying and acknowledging it. You did go through that pain. That was you. And so even in how you express that might be reflecting how you haven't integrated all the parts of yourself, which is true for all of us, but even more for people who've experienced trauma in their life, is that these pieces of you have almost become different parts. Because it's interesting, you can talk about it, and I know you're trying to acknowledge that child within you, but really as if it was another person. And I think that's still something that you're working on. I know financially therapy is not something that's very easy to do. I don't know how it is in France, but if you can find something that's lower fee or something, you just need someone to walk with you through this journey of going into that darkness of your past. But I think what you just shared reflects some of that feeling that it's not even you, and you had to dissociate. I know you've read a lot. You said about trauma. I don't know if you read the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I talked about it, I think, about a year ago.
Read it.
Yeah. And I hope you could relate to a lot of that, where there's lots of ways we respond to trauma, and it's amazing the way the mind and body try to survive. And it seems like one of the ways you've survived is by some ways distancing yourself from that pain. But unfortunately, the pain is still there in your body, in your mind, affecting you. And it's just hard for you to get to it. And it's going to be a process. It's not going to be easy. We can understand your defenses against that. But my recommendation, and really what I'm trying to encourage you to do, is to get closer to the actual emotion of it and not just the intellectual. And the ab reactions, those exercises you've done, seem to be one way of doing that. But it's going to have to be more of a process where you're going to constantly have to revisit those feelings and hopefully over time start to shape or shift how you feel gradually. It's not going to be, these ab reactions can be good, and sometimes people have incredible healing moments, but usually most of the progress we have in these ways, they're small incremental steps towards progress rather than one moment that takes away everything. Sometimes there is that, but usually it's smaller. And so I hope you can seek that out. And, I want to get to some other callers we have on hold, so I'm going to wrap up with you in just about a minute. But coming back to all of these things, as far as your work and your relationship goes, I don't think I've given you exactly any direct advice on what to do with that. But I think it's something you really have to look at the motivation of what you're trying to do. Is it that you're now no longer comfortable there because it was your comfort zone to be alone and now you want to work with others? Or is there some feeling of needing some validation that you're not getting, which can be okay, but making sure you're not going for it in a way that's artificial or too extreme? That I want to be famous or have to do this in order to feel okay and have meaningful work. The meaningful work should be what you're producing, and hopefully it reaches lots of people, but it doesn't mean that if it doesn't reach people, the work itself has no meaning. So take a step back with that. And when it comes to relationships, not just romantic relationships, pursue more friendships and investing in getting to know people in that way too, because something that's lacking for you is connection both to yourself and to others. And you're going to have to make sure you put effort in that. And it's not something that you have to, even I'm mentioning therapy, you have to fix all the issues and heal everything and then have friendships and relationships. No, you can work on yourself, but at the same time, get out there, because some of what's going to help you heal is actually connecting with others and seeing how it goes. You have to take some risks in connection before you can really make all the progress you need to make. Sometimes people feel like, okay, I'm just going to go away in the mountains for 5 years, solve every issue I've ever had, and then I'm going to live my life. But really, we have to do them both at the same time. Do the healing work while we're also in the actual living work. And they also inform each other, because things you experience will help you heal, and things you heal will help you have better experiences. So from what I'm hearing from you, you're very much in that study phase, and that's your comfort zone. But I would emphasize on getting out there and interacting with others even more.
It's very true. I'm taking those little steps, and
Okay, good.
Improvement every day. But what I want to ask you one more thing, and if you could dedicate 1 more minute, I will appreciate that. I don't know if a person has feelings, how that person looks like, or how that person is, and I didn't have an example like that.
Yeah.
So I want to know that, for example, how can you help me to? How did you realize I am disconnected with myself, or how can you help me with that?
Yeah. Well, some of it.
How does it look like to have emotions?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're right. And how, we all have emotions, but yeah, how to be in touch with them and how we express them in a healthy way. Many people didn't have a good model of that, unfortunately. And it seems like in your family, that was even more the case. And to answer your other question of how did I know, and I don't want to say I definitely know, but what it is, it was more a feeling. And that's what's interesting, I think, in asking your question. It's also part of what you're dealing with, which is that I try when I'm talking to you or anyone, or even in my own life with myself, to try to be in touch with what I'm feeling. And it's always a process. I'm always working on it as well. But when I'm more in touch with my feeling, I can pay attention to what I feel when I talk to you. Now, at the same time, it doesn't mean that I say if I feel something, that means I know for sure that's true about you, because there can be lots of reasons I feel things that also relate to myself. And this is what makes these things so complicated. Also, for me, very interesting and fascinating is that my feeling is just some information. It's not a truth, but I pay attention to that. When I'm talking to him, I'm feeling this. And so I'll ask you. So I don't tell you this has to be what's going on, but I bring it up to see if that resonates with you, if you can connect to that, and then we can go back and forth. But so it's about the feelings. It's not like I calculated something intellectually and rationally to come to that place. It's something I felt probably based on my feeling, which is also based on my conversations with so many other people before, that comes together in that moment. And this is why feeling can be so meaningful in even giving us information. It's not that everything we figure out comes from thoughts and from words, which also the book Monday I talked about gets into that. So it was the feeling of it. And that's why I'm encouraging you even more to get in touch with that, which I know you're working on, because then even with yourself, you'll be more in touch. And then when you're relating to others, you'll be able to feel more things that will tell you a bit about what's happening more than just trying to think about it.
Yeah, I thank you so much. It was amazing.
My
and
pleasure.
I will listen to the audio again and again to see to discover more things that you said.
Yes, and I'm happy
Very
that you'll
much.
listen to it again. I think that could be good. But again, even in hearing you say that, my first reaction was, but make sure it's not just listen. It's about also the doing part of really connecting with yourself and with others, because that's something you never had. And that's something you're going to have to keep working on. I'm glad you're taking those small steps. Wish you the best in all of that. And it was nice to talk to you.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.
a good
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, going into another commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's go to another caller. Radio Hamra, you're on the air.
Hi, Dr. Farid.
Hi, thanks for calling.
You're welcome. Thank you for taking my call.
My pleasure. Thank you for calling. Let me know how I can help you.
Okay, so I'm calling about my son. I have a question about him and his career.
Okay.
But I want to give you some information
Sure.
before, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, go. Yes, I need the background. It would be helpful. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, 23
Mm-hmm.
years old. He has a sister. She just turned 17, and he's been here since he was 9 months old.
Okay.
So he was raised here in United States. And unfortunately, when he was 16, my husband was diagnosed with brain tumor, and we lost him 2 years
Oh,
after
I'm
when
so sorry to hear
my
that.
son was 18.
Hmm.
Um, and um, oh my gosh, I thought I'm not going to be nervous, but now I forgot how should I continue.
That's okay. I mean, also what you shared, I'm sure brings up also feelings. I don't know if it does. For me, I was feeling something. You talking about that.
Yes,
I'm so sorry for the loss for your whole family that you guys had to go through. That's very sad.
yes. I think, for my kids, both of them, um, they've lost something that I can't replace. It doesn't matter how much I try
Yeah,
to give them attention and love, but still, it's something that is going to be missing in their life.
of course, and for yourself as well. But yeah, absolutely, and that's unfortunately that's the truth. And I think it's good to keep that in mind because we can't expect things to be like normal or before this happened. This is something unfortunately tragic that happened in the family that you're all dealing with, and it's going to have effects on all of you, I'm sure.
Yes, of course. Um, okay, so my son, he has a bachelor degree
Hmm.
in business,
Hmm.
in sales and marketing. He was accepted into the program, which is very difficult to get in. He's been really smart throughout his whole, school years. He
Hmm.
wasn't you know, a super. He wasn't a really good student. He was a good student, but he always had, a way of knowing stuff and doing stuff. Like he learned about iPhone when he was in middle school, and he learned how to fix iPhones. So he did that for a while for his friends. When he made extra money, it made him so happy. And then when he was in high school, he got into um, learn about stock market and cryptocurrencies,
Hmm.
and he experienced in that too, you know. Um, and then when he started going to business school, he had an idea of him and his friend had an idea of creating a pre-workout tablet, which is dissolvable, which it hasn't been done before.
Hmm.
So they had that idea, they patented the idea, and it has taken all this time for about 3 years to had it to to just make the tablet, and it's still in the process of being made.
Okay.
Um, but um, so this is his idea that they have been working on it for a couple of years. He graduated last year May, and he had 3 offers for jobs, which he declined, and um, and he's been working on this project for this whole time for almost a year and a half.
Okay.
And I've tried to be very supportive of him and
Hmm.
his ideas. I tried to help him financially, with the patterning his idea and, everything else. But at this point, I see him, this young adult who's really smart and he has so much opportunities, but he's waiting on this project of
Okay.
him to come to the market and hoping for people to purchase that.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't think that's a very wise decision for him to make at this point, to not to pursue any type of other type of career on a side.
Well, I don't know there's a lot more to figure out to say if it's the right decision or not because of, um, I don't know how realistic it is what they're doing, what's happening there. But I think overall, you want to let him make this decision more than you make the decision, definitely. And it could be okay for him to put some time in this. I wanted to make another comment because a lot of times people think if someone wants to make a new business, they have to go 100% into that business and quit everything else. Sometimes that's true, but a lot of times people who have made very big innovations, they actually still were working another job while they did something else. So you don't have to completely give up everything else, but that's not saying that in your son's case, he definitely should go work somewhere. And you have to be aware that when you tell him to have another job or pursue something else, he probably is also hearing you saying, I doubt what you're doing. I doubt you. I don't believe in what you're doing, which is not going to feel good for him. So anytime you bring up he should get another job, he's also hearing you say, I don't believe in this business. And even maybe in a deeper way, he might feel like you're saying, I don't believe in you. So I want you to be aware of that, that when you bring up this conversation.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Yes, because at this point now, I don't talk to him about this for about 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, every time, even though I wasn't negative, I was just trying to, talk to him about this subject.
Mm-hmm.
He told me, you're being very negative.
Yeah.
And I don't like that. And that's why I stopped talking about this problem with him, because I feel, I don't, in my eyes, he's capable of everything that he wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
He's smart. But if I say something, he thinks in a negative way. So at this point, I'm not saying anything to him.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to be, at the same time, I don't want to be, I don't want to be quiet because I'm afraid that he's going to think I'm being negative. But at the same time, I want him to make a right decision. I want him to choose if he wants to go get a job or not.
Well, it seems like he's making. I know you're saying you want him to choose, but it seems like he's making his choice, but you don't like it. So it's not just that you want him to choose. You clearly seem to have a preference, which is that he should get a job. So as much as you're saying you want to let him choose, if we really want to let him choose, as hard as it might be for you because of how you're feeling, you have to let him make his choice. Now, as always, you can have conversations with him based on how your relationship is with him, based on how he sees you when it comes to this issue. That's going to affect if you can or can't really have meaningful conversations with him. But it has to be something he wants to have. If he wants to come tell you, Mom, I'm also worried about the business, blah, 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 this. Or if he says, Mom, actually, I feel confident about it, just let me do it. That's going to have to be something you have to accept as well. Before I get into that, I'm wondering, though, from your perspective, which obviously is just how you see it, do you feel like he's being idealistic or unrealistic when it comes to this business idea? Or do you feel like he's looking at it in some way? No one's going to be perfectly objective about their own business, but do you feel like he's objective or he's totally out of touch with reality?
No, he's being realistic.
Okay.
But this is only one product.
Sure.
I know he has an entrepreneurship mind.
Yeah.
And that's what sometimes I talk to him about, that, you have to think of more product after this one. When one comes to market.
I'm not a business expert or an entrepreneurial expert. My brother actually knows much more about that, but I wouldn't say that he has to be focusing on multiple products at the same time. He's only 23 also. I'd want you to remember that at his age, most people have not done a lot of these things or starting their own businesses. And so that's good. He's getting that experience. And I think rather than finding out if he's doing it exactly the most ideal way and could he do something else as well at the same time, I would focus, as I always tell parents, on your relationship with him rather than trying to be a business coach or career coach for him, because he needs that less. And plus, not to doubt you, but we don't really know. I don't know exactly what's the right thing anyway. So I'd
I
focus more on
don't
being
know.
with him.
Yes.
Yeah, we don't know, and that's okay. You're not supposed to know. You don't need to
Yes.
know. And I don't think anyone knows for sure that exactly he should definitely get a job or he should not get a job. And so don't put that pressure on yourself, one, to know, and then two, to communicate it to him, and then three, for him to make some kind of decision or change. I think you're feeling the anxiety of, as an entrepreneur, he's dealing with a more uncertain job. Obviously, if you have a salary at a job you're working at, it's very clear how much money you're going to make, it's stable and all of that. But when you're an entrepreneur, you can make lots and lots of money, or you can make zero money and lose money, and that's part of the job. That's just how that career goes. And it's up to him what he wants to choose to do. I'm sure it's bringing up anxiety for you of, okay, you maybe prefer he had a more stable income or a more stable job because you wouldn't worry about him as much. And you also can look at, I know you mentioned financially you've supported him. You have to make sure the support you give him is something you're okay with, that you can handle, because you might be feeling frustrated with that, or you might be feeling like, well, if I'm paying for him to live with me or whatever it is, then he maybe should listen to me. But I'd want you to think about some of those thoughts you might have as well.
Yes. Okay. So um, for a very long time, it's been about 8 years that I have worked with therapists.
Uh-huh.
To go through the whole situation that my family and I went through. So he has a therapist that I've worked with. So, with his help, I could just, tell him, okay, instead of me giving you my credit card to use for your daily stuff, maybe you want to have a job to pay for some of your things, since I paid for your college and the first business stuff that you had to pay.
Uh-huh.
And he didn't like it in the beginning, but then he found like a job that is just a part-time job, 2 days out of the week that he works.
Okay.
He's managing a company's online store. So he's doing that, and that's all he does, because that's the only money that he needs.
Okay, well, then what's the problem?
Okay, but, I see him waking up late, go to the gym, that's his routine, come back for 3-4 hours a day. He works, for what he has to do. And then after that, he doesn't have anything to do till the next day.
Okay.
And I feel...
And, I can understand your concern about that. We do tend to have this mindset about work, that you have to work 8-10 hours a day or it's bad. And maybe that's not really true. It's just something we've accepted as part of life, and it doesn't have to be that way. If you're worried, is he okay? Does he feel depressed? Is he going through something? You can find out with him. How does he feel about the routine? But you have to be careful that anytime you ask him something, let's say about his life and how much time he's spending towards work, he's going to hear it and, make some sense for him to hear it this way, as you judging him, as telling him something is wrong.
I can't ask him anything.
Well, I'm not saying that you're wrong, but it could be that the ways you're asking him makes him feel judged, or he's so used to you judging him that as soon as you ask him about something, he already hears it through the lens of you're judging him. So for you to change that, it means that when you ask him, you're asking because you want to know, not because you want to judge or to change or to shame him. But a lot of parents and people in general, they don't ask. When they say, did you study last night? It's not that they really want to get information. It's that they're saying, you better have studied last night. If you didn't, you're bad. And here we go again. You're doing, these bad things again. So asking is very different than wanting to know in order to tell them something and judge them. And he might be used to that. And so you have to be aware of that dynamic. And to change that will take some time. You can even acknowledge that with him, that a lot of times when I ask you something or I talk about your life, I can see how I make you feel like I'm judging you or putting you down. And even that makes it hard for you to talk to me. And I apologize for that, or I acknowledge that. And maybe I can be different with you because I want to know more about what's going on in your life and be closer to you, but I don't want to push you away or make you feel judged by me. And even you calling me today, I think part of what you're trying to figure out is how can I get my message to him? And what I hope you can recognize is rather than trying to get a message to him, we want to help him get his message to you, or get to you what he's thinking and feeling. And the best way to do that is actually to try to not change him. That you don't have to. And even you said something, I want to make sure he's not wasting his time or doing something. I don't know. And there's no guarantee, and no one could know for sure. But we don't want to put that pressure on him. And at 23, I'm not so worried that he has to do something this perfectly right way, whatever that even is. And I would want you, as I always tell parents, to focus more on your relationship with him rather than coaching him in some way.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the reason I called today because I want to know that what is the right thing for me to do, because I feel like his therapist is guiding me to go to tell him, maybe you want to move out. I support you for a couple of months, and you can be on your own, for him to have his independence.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't feel comfortable doing that.
So this is his therapist or your therapist?
Okay, no, his therapist.
Okay, his therapist is telling him.
I have my own therapist.
Okay.
But I go to his therapist. Sometimes I tell him that, okay, we have an appointment. Do you want to come? Sometimes, rarely, he comes with me. Other than that, I go alone to his therapist.
I don't know.
And if I have questions,
I don't know if that's ideal for you to go to his therapy or his therapist if he doesn't want you to, or he's not going with you. You usually, there's something in how you're talking about. You might be too involved in him in general and in his space.
Okay, but all right. So for me, if his dad was here, everything would have been different.
Well, I'm sure.
Now I feel responsible. It's my responsibility for him to find his path, for him to be successful, or, for me to give him everything, all the guidance, all the help that I can give him. And that's why I picked the male therapist for him.
Well, I think clearly you care a lot about your kids, and you're trying to make the best of a very unfortunate situation with the passing of your husband and their father. But even in hearing you say that, I feel like you're putting too much pressure on yourself to think, first of all, that you can be mother and father and be two people. But even still, even if there is a mother and a father, they don't have to pick the path for their kids or really force them or make that decision for them. You create the environment where they can pick that path and choose it, and not only just pick it because he might do something and not like it and change paths and all of that, as most of us do throughout life, but I think you're putting too much pressure on yourself, feeling that because their father's not here, I'm supposed to do even more, but you're trying to do even more than even a mother and father need to do together. You don't need to find the right path for him, give him the perfect advice in every realm of his life, make decisions for him. That's not your responsibility, or you and their father, any parents together need to do all that. And so I think because of that loss, you're feeling even more of this responsibility that you're going to be letting them down or they're not getting enough. The pain of losing their father was horrible, and I know it's horrible for you too, but it doesn't mean that you have to compensate for it by doing too much. And so that's something to also think about, that you are trying to make up for all this pain that they went through and the lack of the father they now have, but it might push you towards doing too much sometimes and trying to make everything right and okay and perfect now when it's never going to be and it doesn't need to be. So if anything, I would want you to do less when it comes to that way of picking the path and guiding him exactly where to go, and really let him figure out that much more than you need to.
So that's how can I help him?
Well, you don't need to help him so much. I don't know exactly how he's doing, but as always, you want to help him through your relationship with him, not through your words of wisdom or guidance or speeches. A lot of times parents I work with, it's like they feel like they have to come with the perfect lecture or pep talk to get their kid to do this or stop doing this. But your role, especially even if he was younger, but he's 23, is to just be there for him as a mom, to have a relationship. If he wants to talk to you, if he wants to communicate, If he wants your advice, he can ask it, and sometimes you can give him some, but don't put so much pressure on yourself that I have to come up with the perfect advice for him. First of all, you have to figure out what that is, and then you have to give it to him in this perfect way, neither of which you can do or really are your responsibility. You're just his mom. And as his mom, you're there for him, you love him, you support him, you make him feel good about himself, but then you let him make his decisions, let him fall sometimes, let him figure out his path, and then he's going to have to walk those steps himself anyway.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but for me, I feel comfortable for him to live here in the house and do what he has to do. But I feel like, when is the best time for him to find his independence and move out?
I don't know if there's exactly a right time. I think different people do it at different ages. If it's financially okay with you and he wants it, I mean, it can be okay but don't do something you don't feel good about, and don't feel like if you can't financially afford it that you have to do that. But if you're really wanting him to stay in the home out of this anxiety of, one, I want to do more for him, and two, I'm afraid if he's on his own, he's going to go down a bad path. I wouldn't let those things get in the way. You have to let him grow, and growing sometimes means he's going to fall. And I'm not saying he necessarily has to move out, but I mean in general, be aware of, it seems like you're trying to protect him, maybe protect him too much. And that's going to actually get in the way of his growth more than actually push him forward.
Okay, and as far as his business?
I think you have to let him figure that out, because he's in it, and let him see what happens with it. Many people, they have businesses, they don't do well, or they do really well. They go through different things, but to figure out that, is this worth it or not? At this point, it seems like he's invested so much into it and he's in it that I think let him go through that anyway. And even if he wasn't, you really have to give him that space. This is his decision to make, not mine or yours.
I know, but I feel like, I'm sitting and watching him.
Well, that's another problem. You shouldn't be sitting and watching him. You should be making sure you're focused on your own life, too.
I know. Okay, all right. Yes, but, I'm afraid that he lose this opportunity.
Okay, that's okay.
Because he's just so young.
That's all the part. He is so young. So there's no. You're right. Can he have another job at 22? No. Last year he can't go back and get a job, but he's figuring out his path. And so don't be so afraid of everything has to be right today and has to go perfectly, or he has to make use of every minute. It's going to be up to him. All of us went through different paths, and yeah, if we look back, we were inefficient and wasted time and could have went this way instead of that way. But we have to let him go, and that's what I'm saying. Don't try to control his life so much. And that's even what I felt when he talked about going to his therapist. You're trying to get too much involved. I think, like I said, it's not just about his father not being there. You're trying to do too much than even two parents have to do as far as controlling someone's life. Giving him more space is something that's going to be better. He needs that. And even, that one, we had maybe 10 seconds where we talked about you in all of this and your life. And that's what I mean, is really focusing more on yourself rather than just on him.
Okay. But, it's with everything with my...
Let me put you on hold, because we went way over the commercial break, and I want to be able to wrap up with you and not so abruptly. No, don't feel bad about that. I'm going to put you on hold, and then we'll come back and finish our conversation, okay? Okay, all right. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let's go back to the caller we were with before the break. Caller, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay. We were talking about your son, but the more I'm thinking about it, we need to talk about you.
And my daughter.
Yes, well, yeah, your daughter as well. We don't want to forget her.
Yes.
Yeah. She's 17, so she was maybe like 12, 13 when her father passed?
No, 11.
11, okay.
Yeah. She was 11, and she just turned 17.
Okay.
My two kids, they're really sweet. They're really good kids. Always, from the beginning. So my daughter, she is exactly the opposite of my son.
Mm-hmm.
She is very independent. She wants to go out of the state for her college, for her bachelor degree.
Okay. How do you feel about that?
I'm trying to convince her to stay in state
Why is that?
because actually I want him to stay in the same city.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But she doesn't want that.
That's
I
good.
told her.
Yeah, you need to let her go.
Yes, I told her that if
Okay.
she stays even in the same city as we are, I can get her an apartment or she can live in the dorm to be out of the house for the experience. She doesn't have to go to another state to do that. So she is exactly the opposite. She wants to go out, but she's going to be only 18.
Mm-hmm.
I feel I don't want her to go out of state, but even in another city, I feel hesitant.
What do you think what is it that you don't want?
I just want her to be closer. Because,
I know.
If she was 20 or 22, she could be more aware of the situation around her. She could.
Right, but millions of kids in the United States go away to college when they're 18. I'm not saying it makes it necessarily right or good, but I mean that they seem to survive and do okay. And I think it's, again, going back to this with your son, it's more her decision to make than yours. And that's what I mean. Not that you really use it as an excuse, but in a way in your mind, it could seem like because they don't have their father, I have to control them more. But that's not true.
No. I'm not trying to control her, but I'm trying to convince her. That's what I'm trying.
Convincing is just a way of saying I want to control without using the word control, because you're trying to get her to do what you want her. I mean, when people say someone is controlling, we don't literally mean they put a gun to their head and say you have to do this, but it's about how they're trying to, quote unquote, as you said, convince them to do what they want rather than doing what the person themselves wants them to do. And something I'm wondering is if you might have had some of this within you before, of the anxiety or how you're feeling about your kids, but maybe losing your husband has also made you more afraid to lose them.
Yes, I realize how life is fragile.
Yeah, and it is, and unfortunately for you guys, you had to experience that too much firsthand, which I think is unfortunate and very unfair. But we have to make sure that because life is also fragile, we let each person live their own life the way they want to live it as well. That if we get in the way of that life, that's also not appreciating how fragile life is.
That's true.
And I know it's tough to have that fear, and it's the fear is sometimes, okay, if she's in the same city or the next city, I can do something, but nothing is probably going to ever happen to her in the ways you're worried about. But really, you can't do much, even in the ways you think you can. And so she's going to be okay, whether she goes to school in state, out of state. But I think there's a lot you're still dealing with. I'm glad you're going to your own therapy and focusing on that, because I'm sure what you had to go through with your husband and then dealing with the kids after that has been incredibly painful, and it, of course, is going to affect how you feel as a person and also as a parent. And it's going to be hard to put that pain aside at times to do what's best for the kids and letting them grow. But I want you to be aware that your bias is almost always going to be about just doing the more comfortable, easier thing to keep them close to you. And you have to try your best to be able to let that go. And losing your husband, I'm sure, has made you feel more alone. And you're going to be more drawn towards your kids and not want to lose them. And so this goes back to looking at your own life and how you want to make sure it's more full with connection and things that you have in your life, so you won't be as dependent on them to make you feel good or make you feel complete.
Yeah, but I'm not dependent on them, but at the time I feel so much pressure that, I have to do a really good job and give them everything.
It seems like you've done a great job in a really tough situation, but when you say do everything, I want you to be aware of that could sometimes become a problem because you can want to do too much. So you can say, well, I want to do everything. So when my son is eating food, I'm going to move his mouth to help him chew because I want to do everything. That's what we sometimes do. We try to help, but we want to do too much. We get in the way rather than actually helping. So it seems like you're doing a whole lot and giving them what you can, but I think your issue is going to be more about doing too much rather than too little. So that's something I just want you to look at when it comes to your son and your daughter both, that you might want to be too involved. And maybe the word dependent sounded like I was judging the situation or judging you, but I meant that you're going to try to keep them closer for reasons that you can then justify by saying, because I want to do more for them. But sometimes as parents or anyone that loves someone, the best thing we can do for them is to give them space or to not even be there, is to let them do something on their own or choose their own path. But I think it's going to be hard for you to do that. So it's just some things to think about. And going back to your son, as I mentioned before, don't think you have to figure out the right business plan, business advice, career advice for him. You're his mom, which means he can talk to you. You're going to love him and give him support, but hopefully also give him the space to make his own choices. And if he fails, he fails. And even if he fails, I don't like that word, but he's going to learn a lot from this process that he'll then take into the next one. And so you want to just help him by being a support that if this business does well or doesn't, he always has your love there as a stable force. But take that pressure off yourself that you have to figure out the right career advice and business advice.
Yes, I think you gave me a really good advice. I just, the whole time I tried to do something to help.
Yeah.
And the times that I didn't say anything, I felt like, wow, this is really bad. I'm not doing anything. But I'm going to try this. So just for a while, just give him his space for him to decide and not worry about it. Because, I have given him his space for about 6 months.
Okay.
But I worry every day.
Yeah, I mean, try to, and that worry, deal with it on your own and don't think you have to give that to him. That's what a lot of parents do, is they worry and they dump that anxiety and worry onto their kids when it's not their kids to deal with. You worry about him, of course you're going to care. I don't expect you to ever not care about how his business is doing, but don't get so caught up in the up and down, and don't get so caught up in what do I have to do to fix this or make it better. Give them that space. And as I mentioned to you before, I can understand you're so afraid to lose your kids, to have something happen to them because of what you went through, especially. But sometimes we have to be aware that we're so afraid to lose life that we might take away the life that we're living, to sacrifice it in order to make sure we don't lose them. So you can put them both in a room and never have them leave the room, and nothing will ever happen to them, but they also won't get to live their lives either. And so it's trying to find that balance and recognizing that giving them that space, it can be scary, both that you'll lose them as far as how close they are to you and that something can happen to them, but hopefully you'll recognize that you have to accept that risk or that reality of life in order to let them really live their life to the fullest. So I wish you the best in figuring that out for both of them, and also for yourself in how to give yourself more of the life you want, to feel better about that.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So nice to talk to you. I appreciate you calling.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate all the advice.
Oh, my pleasure. Take care. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye. All right, going into our last commercial break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. For the last segment today, wanted to talk a bit about going to therapy. As you heard me talk about a few callers today, I think it's something I recommend to lots of people when they're calling, but also just to people in general, to go to therapy. And so I wanted to talk about some misconceptions or things that people might think about therapy that might get in the way, because I know that for many people, once they enter therapy, or if I'm seeing a client for the first time, usually it's been quite a while that they've wanted to go or have thought about going to therapy, but there was things that were holding them back. And so I wanted to talk a bit about some of the ideas that people sometimes have about therapy that can get in the way of them seeking therapy themselves. And I'll mention this, as I do oftentimes when it comes up on the show, that I go to my own therapy. every week. And when I go to therapy, I do have issues that I want to work on, but it's not that I go because I think something is broken and I have to fix it. It's that I want to understand myself better, to grow, and to work on the issues that I do have. And so that's the first thing I wanted to talk about therapy in general. Unfortunately, for many people, they think therapy is something that crazy people go to, or people who have really big or bad issues, or you had to have gone through a really big trauma to have need to go to therapy or to want to go to therapy. And those things are not true. Of course, if you have any of those things, trauma and abuse and issues, therapy can be very helpful for you, but it's not limited only to those people. And especially, therapy is not something for crazy people. A lot of times people will say, oh, what's the craziest thing you've heard, or what type of clients do you deal with? And there's this idea that people have that really messed up people have to go to therapy, or if they're talking about things, it's something really crazy or dramatic and only those people are going to therapy, when really a lot of what you see in therapy as a therapist is people talking about everyday type of struggles or internal struggles and things that they're dealing with that aren't always so attention grabbing as far as a story goes, but that they're very meaningful and important, and they're going through things. And so that's the first thing I wanted to say about therapy, that it's more about self-awareness and understanding yourself than it is about directly fixing problems and taking them away. It's more about self-awareness than just fixing problems. And so you learn more about yourself, you understand yourself better, what you feel, you get more in touch with what you're feeling. Most people, most of the time, don't actually know what they're feeling, which might be surprising because you think we're in our own bodies and our own heads, so to speak. But how do we not know what we're feeling? But most of us are very out of touch. And so that's one big step and goal of therapy, is to get you more in touch with your feelings and more aware of them, because our feelings serve as information, as I was talking to one of the callers earlier today about. If I'm aware of what I'm feeling, that can tell me a lot. If I spend time with someone and afterwards I feel very good, I could try to understand that better by first understanding that good feeling. Where is it coming from? What does it mean? Is it about something about me and this person that's good? Or let's say I leave that same interaction, or I leave an interaction with someone and I'm sad, or I notice I'm always sad when I say bye to someone. Am I sad because I miss them, or am I sad actually because they don't make me feel good? But our feelings, our emotions can tell us a lot about ourselves, our lives, our relationships. And until we're more in touch with them, we can't use that information. So a big part of therapy is getting in touch with ourselves and more understanding of ourselves and increasing our self-awareness. Related to that, another misconception people have about therapy, which sometimes gets reinforced by movies and TV shows, is that when you're in therapy, it's all about having these big aha moments that change your life. That you're in therapy and all of a sudden you realize, oh, it was because my mom, da-da-da-da-da-da, and the person wakes up and life never is the same again. When that's actually not true. Most of the progress you're going to see in therapy is small steps, or you won't even be aware of the changes for a while. And the progress in therapy does take some time usually because of this. It's incremental. You have issues related to self-esteem. Your therapist is not going to say one amazing quote or say one thing or figure out the one memory that's causing all your problems and then make your self-esteem amazing. But people do experience improved self-esteem over time through the relationship and through the therapy that they go through. So that's another misconception, that it's all about these big aha moments. And the way I sometimes feel people think about this or feel about it is they think it's almost like there's some hair somewhere or just one thing, and you have to just pluck that hair or pick that thing out, and then everything goes away and everything becomes good, when it's really not like that. And actually what you really recognize is therapy is less about plucking away these bad things or bad parts of ourselves, and more about integrating all the different aspects of our personalities and who we are. So people come in and they sometimes want you to get rid of something about them, or even more sadly about their kids. Oh, my kid is anxious, take away his anxiety. But that's not really how it works. Yes, we can work on anxiety and hopefully reduce it and manage it, but we don't take it away. Anxiety, anger, sadness, these are not things that get erased or removed, and actually it's not healthy if we lose them completely. We need them to some degree. And so again, therapy is less about erasing certain feelings and certain ways of being, and more about integrating those things together. Another very important thing I tell clients and like to talk about when it comes to therapy is that therapy is about self-care and taking care of yourself and improving yourself. Absolutely. But When we say it's part of self-care and taking care of yourself, it doesn't mean that it's easy or that you don't have to do any work. Quite the opposite. It's very hard, and it does take lots of work from you. So the example I like to use is that some people might think going to therapy is like getting a massage where you just relax and feel better as a result. But I say it's actually more like going to the gym and getting a personal trainer, where they're going to push you. They're there to help you, but you have to do the hard work. You have to sweat. You got to lift the heavy weights and do all the work it takes. And also related to that, similar to how your body gets in better shape and you grow muscle, the only way you grow is by getting out of your comfort zone. So the whole point of having a trainer is to push you past what you think you can do, to make you feel pain, but in a good way, the pain of growth, not the pain of damage. And so similarly in therapy, the therapist isn't just there to make you feel warm and cuddly. Of course, there is a lot of that feeling of warmth and making you feel good about yourself, but their job isn't just to make you feel comfortable every moment. It's actually to push you out of your comfort zone slowly in ways you can handle it, because they know, as we all should be aware of, that the only way you grow is by facing some discomfort and some pain. So think of the therapist in a way as like your emotional personal trainer that's trying to push you out of your comfort zone, because when we live just a comfortable life, we can be unhappy, unsatisfied, and unfulfilled. If we really want to live a life that we want, we have to go beyond that comfort zone. So we have to be aware that therapy is not something easy, even though we're taking care of ourselves, just like going to the gym. It's something that requires us to do the hard work in order to get better. And we have to be ready for that it's not going to be easy. And because of that, a lot of people stop therapy after a few times. They come once or twice, and we have to be ready that sometimes you might feel worse before you feel better when you go to therapy, because you might be bringing up old feelings or memories and things that you don't want to be in touch with. And so they'll feel worse, and they'll start to get to that hard work and getting into uncomfortable feelings. And very often they'll think, you know what? I'm actually better. I've realized that I'm okay. I don't think I need therapy. And they'll say something along those lines. But really what's going on is they're getting into the hard work and they don't want to face it, and they prefer stopping. So if you do start therapy, be ready for that. A lot of times you'll feel worse, or you'll feel the hard work, or getting into the uncomfortable feelings and thoughts and memories from past and present that don't feel so good. And so you might try to convince yourself that you don't need to go. And you might stop, but I hope you will continue. And I hope you will even start going if you haven't, or go to therapy. I do have to wrap up the show and had more thoughts I wanted to share, but this is a topic that comes up a lot because I'm always encouraging people to go into their own therapy if they haven't before. If they have, to go back to work on things as a couple, whatever it might be. Mental health services and therapists are there to help. Not because you're crazy, bad, or anything like that, but just because we all deserve help sometimes. And so if anyone's listening and thinking about it, I hope you'll take that step and go into your own therapy. All right, we've reached the end of today's show. You've been listening to In Session with Dr. Farid Holakouee. Have a wonderful day.